So, if you spend any time at all doom scrolling,
Yeah.
and I mean, let's be honest, who doesn't these days?
Yeah.
You know the drill.
Oh, yeah.
You can't go like 5 minutes without hitting a video or a thread just dissecting toxic masculinity.
Mm-hmm. We know all the symptoms by heart now.
Could we do? The aggression, the emotional suppression, that whole, incel to trad husband pipeline, it's very well trodden ground.
It is. It's practically its own genre of content at this point.
Exactly. But what's really rare is when we turn that same high-powered critical microscope onto the counter movement, the response.
You're talking about the world of the divine feminine.
That's the one. And I have to admit, even saying we're going to critique, it feels, I don't know, it feels almost forbidden.
It does a little.
It has divine in the name. It's all soft lighting and flowing dresses and essential oils. It feels like kicking a puppy or, I don't know, yelling at a sunset.
Right.
But today, we are doing a deep dive into a piece that argues this movement has a shadow side, one that's just as dysfunctional as the toxicity it claims to heal.
It's a very provocative take. We're looking at a really fascinating article by Ryan Collison from the publication Money Sex Nerd.
Right.
It's titled, "The Divine Feminine Isn't the Opposite of Toxic Masculinity." And I think before we get into the meat of it, the context is just so key here.
What's the context?
This is actually part 7 of a whole series he's doing. It's called Toxic Masculinity in 2026, a field guide.
Okay, that is important context, because if you just read that headline, you might think, oh, great, here's another guy complaining about women's spirituality.
Exactly. But Collison spent the first 6 parts of this series just absolutely torching modern male dysfunction.
He went after the looksmaxers, the crypto bro.
The alpha camps, all of it.
Yeah.
So he's established his bona fides,
Yeah.
He's not an outsider just throwing stone.
Right, he's been wading through the swamp of gender discourse for a while.
He has. But his argument here is that simply saying men are the problem, women are the cure, isn't analysis.
What is it then?
It's just catharsis. And look, catharsis feels good in the moment, but it doesn't actually fix the underlying rot. He calls the whole phenomenon we're seeing today the divine feminine industrial complex.
Industrial complex. Wow.
Okay.
That is a heavy term.
It is.
It usually implies, weapons manufacturers or big pharma. Why apply that to something that's mostly about, I don't know, moon circles and affirmation cards?
Because it operates like a system. It's become this machine of commerce, of aesthetics, and ideology that just reinforces itself.
Okay.
So our mission today is really to figure out, is the divine feminine actually a path to empowerment, or has it become a marketplace of avoidance that stops people from actually growing up?
So let's be fair before we, start tearing things down. Collison isn't saying the concept itself is garbage, is he?
No.
Because I know a lot of people find real value in these ideas.
No. And that is a critical distinction he makes right at the start. He clarifies that the divine feminine is a legitimate historical concept.
Good.
It has really deep roots. You find it in Hindu Tantra, Shakti energy. You see it in Jungian psychology, in the Taoist concept of yin. These are ancient frameworks describing these universal principles.
Like receptivity, intuition.
Receptivity, intuition, creation, chaos, all of it.
Right, so these are archetypes. They aren't products. They're psychological maps.
Exactly. But the critique is about what happened when those deep, complex archetypes met the algorithm.
When they met the influencer economy.
Yeah. The Instagramification of the soul.
Right.
Basically. Collison argues that the industrial complex version has just stripped all the nuance out of these traditions and packaged them into a consumer identity.
I see.
It's no longer about a difficult internal process or facing your shadow. It's about the aesthetic. The beige linen, the specific brand of ethically sourced cacao, the retreat in Tulum.
I think we all know someone, or maybe we are that someone, who's bought into that aesthetic because it feels safe.
Oh.
It feels soft in a hard world. But play devil's advocate for me. Is that inherently a bad thing? If buying a crystal makes me feel better, where's the harm?
And that's the pushback Collison anticipates. He says there's nothing wrong with ritual. Rituals are human. We need them.
Sure.
The danger emerges when the aesthetic replaces the substance, when divine feminine becomes a costume you wear to insulate yourself from criticism.
How does that work, though? How does a linen dress protect you from criticism?
Well, think about the structure of toxic masculinity for a second. How does it protect the male ego?
It frames any vulnerability as weakness.
Exactly. It creates a shield. The divine feminine industrial complex does the inverse. It protects the ego by framing any criticism as bad vibes, low vibration, or, a lack of spiritual understanding.
Oh, I see where this is going. So if I'm acting selfishly and you call me out on it, I can just say, you just can't handle my goddess energy.
Precisely. You create this closed loop where you're never wrong, you're just too divine or too deep for the other person to grasp. It becomes a way to bypass accountability while feeling morally superior.
That actually leads perfectly into the central logical error the article points out. I think for most people, the equation in their head is pretty simple. Toxic masculinity is the disease.
And divine femininity is the cure.
Right. We need less of one, more the other, like a seesaw.
That is the standard cultural narrative. The world is too hard, too aggressive, too masculine.
So the solution must be to become softer, more yielding, more feminine.
But Collison says that's a trap.
Now,
It's a category error. He argues that toxic masculinity describes a set of behavioral dysfunctions: violence, dominance, emotional suppression.
okay.
Divine feminine, on the other hand, describes a spiritual archetype.
So
You cannot cure behavioral disorder with a mood board. They aren't opposites.
that's a great line. Okay, so if divine femininity isn't the opposite of toxic masculinity, what is?
The true opposite of toxic masculinity is healthy masculinity.
Okay, pause there. Because healthy masculinity is a term that gets thrown around, but I don't know if we ever really define it. It usually just means a man who is nice.
Right.
What does that look like in this context?
In this context, it's about structure and safety. It means emotional literacy, knowing what you feel and being able to name it.
Okay.
Secure attachment, accountability for your actions. It's about being collaborative rather than dominant. It's having a backbone, not to crush others, but to support them.
So the cure for toxic men isn't for them to become divine women.
No.
It's for them to become healthy men.
Right. And by forcing this false binary where man equals bad toxic and woman equals good divine, we actually let men off the hook.
How so?
We ignore the work they need to do to become healthy men, and at the same time, we burden women with being the spiritual fix for all of humanity.
It puts women on a pedestal,
Yeah,
which historically is a very cramped place to live.
it is.
You can't move much on a pedestal.
Exactly. It's benevolent sexism disguised as spiritual reverence.
Now, I want to get into the mechanics of how this industrial complex actually operates in daily life. Because the theory is interesting, but the practice is where it gets messy. The article talks a lot about spiritual bypassing. I've heard this term. It was coined by John Wellwood, right?
Yes, way back in the 80s. Wellwood was a psychologist and a Buddhist practitioner. He noticed that people in spiritual communities were using their beliefs to skip over to bypass the messy emotional work.
So, like, they'd use concepts like transcendence to avoid dealing with their childhood trauma.
Or their relationship issues, yeah. It's like using a get-out-of-jail-free card, but the card says love and light.
Right, or radical acceptance.
Or everything happens for a reason. Collison points out that the divine feminine framework is practically engineered for this kind of bypassing.
Why?
Because its vocabulary is so vague and lofty, you can make almost anything sound spiritual if you try hard enough.
The article gave some absolutely brutal examples of this. One that really stuck with me was the concept of flow. We hear this all the time. I'm in my flow. Go with the flow. Sounds great. What's the shadow side?
The shadow side is using flow to mask indecision, flakiness, or just unreliability.
Could you give an example?
Sure, imagine a scenario. You're trying to make plans with a friend or a partner. They won't commit to a time. They won't pick a restaurant.
Okay.
When you press them, because, you have a schedule, they say, I can't be rigid. I'm in my feminine flow. I need to see how I feel in the moment.
And suddenly, my need for a plan makes me the bad guy. I'm being controlling or too masculine because I want to know if we're meeting at 7.000.
Exactly. Flow becomes a cover for a lack of consideration for someone else's time. It reframes a functional deficit being flaky as a spiritual superpower.
Wow. Another one that hit hard was surrender. Because in a real spiritual context, surrender is hard. It's letting go of control.
It's profound, right? In a deep sense, surrender is accepting things you cannot change. But in the industrial complex, surrender is often used to abdicate responsibility for your own life choices.
How does that play out?
Let's say someone is ignoring their financial reality. They're spending money they don't have on retreats and crystals.
Okay.
Instead of looking at their bank account, making a budget, and cutting back, which is hard structured work, they say, I am surrendering to the abundance of the universe.
Oof. So being irresponsible is rebranded as trusting the universe. That is,
Yeah.
that's convenient.
It sounds noble, it sounds pious, but Really, it's just avoidance. And the most damaging one, arguably, is holding space.
I see this term everywhere. I'm holding space for you.
And it's valid in a therapeutic context, but in a relationship, it is often weaponized to avoid conflict.
I see.
If you are naturally conflict avoidant, it is very convenient to tell yourself, I'm not afraid to speak up, I'm just holding space.
So you stay silent when you're actually angry. You just swallow it.
You stay silent, you seethe, you build resentment, but you tell yourself you're doing it because you are energetically supporting the other person.
But that's not sustainable.
No. Collison argues this destroys intimacy. Real intimacy requires friction. It requires saying, hey, I didn't like that. But if your identity is built on being the soft, receptive goddess, direct confrontation feels like a failure.
And so when you finally do explode because you can't take it anymore,
It's framed as feminine rage or Kalite energy. It's dramatic, it's justified, but really it's just the predictable result of poor communication skills.
that is the kicker.
Mm.
The framing allows you to be the hero of the story at every stage, even when you're the one causing the dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
And the article mentions that this doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's an echo chamber involved.
Right. If you surround yourself with people who all subscribe to this industrial complex, no one is going to check you. Judgment is considered low vibration.
And logic is patriarchal.
Logic is patriarchal.
Yeah.
So if you tell your circle, I just couldn't commit to a time because I was in my flow, they won't say, that was rude to your friend. They'll say, good for you for honoring your rhythm.
It's a validation machine for immaturity.
It really is. It prevents people from doing the actual adult work, developing clear communication, taking responsibility for finances, and learning to tolerate the discomfort of conflict.
I want to pivot to a deeper philosophical point the article makes. It's about essentialism.
Yes.
We hear a lot that women are naturally more intuitive or the feminine is inherently nurturing. On the surface, that sounds like a compliment. Why does Collison call this a trap?
Because it sounds like a compliment, but it's actually a cage. Essentialism is the idea that your personality traits are hardwired into your biology.
Okay.
That because you have a female body, your essence is nurturing, yielding, and soft.
But isn't that backward? I mean, didn't feminism spend the last 50 years fighting the idea that biology is destiny?
That is the massive irony here. Feminism fought to prove that women can be anything: CEOs, soldiers, scientists, assertive, competitive.
Right.
But the divine feminine industrial complex circles right back around to 1950s gender roles. It just gives them a makeover. Instead of saying women should be submissive, it says women should be receptive.
It's the horseshoe theory of gender. The far progressive spiritual side meets the trad wife conservative side, and they shake hands.
They do, and this puts actual women in a terrible double bind. Think about a woman who is naturally direct, ambitious, logical, or competitive traits traditionally coded as masculine.
Right.
If she buys into this framework, she starts to believe she is wounded.
She thinks she's doing womanhood wrong.
Exactly. You'll hear phrases like, you're too in your masculine, or you have a hardened shell. She starts to feel like she needs to heal her personality.
Oh, that's sad.
But Collison is saying, maybe there is nothing to heal. Maybe you're just a direct, ambitious person, and that is fine.
It's wild that we even need to say that. Personality does not reduce to gender.
It shouldn't. Some women are intuitive, some aren't. Some men are nurturing, some aren't. Pretending that biology dictates your spiritual archetype just creates a new set of constraints that limits everyone.
Okay, so we can't do a deep dive on an industrial complex without, following the money.
Yeah.
How big is this business?
Billions. The wellness economy is massive, and the mystical services sector, astrology apps, crystals, retreats, tarot is one of the fastest growing segments.
I have to confess, I have an oracle deck.
Yeah,
It is undeniably pretty,
of course.
and I don't think it's ruining my life.
And look, Collison isn't saying owning an oracle deck makes you a bad person. The problem is the transactional nature of it, the belief that you can buy spiritual progress.
It's the difference between going to the gym and just buying the activewear.
It's worse. It's buying the activewear and believing that wearing it creates muscle.
Ah,
The divine feminine industrial complex sells the appearance of spiritual depth. It sells the aesthetic of healing without the grunt work of integration.
which brings us to the part of the article that I found the most uncomfortable and probably the most necessary, the accountability dodge. We talked about this a bit with Flo, but he goes deeper. He compares the way toxic men and toxic spiritual women handle conflict.
This is the weaponized therapy speak section. We know how toxic men avoid accountability, aggression, dominance, just shutting the conversation down.
Right. Brute force. I'm the man. End of discussion.
Exactly. The feminine equivalent in this toxic framework is all intellectual and spiritual maneuvering. It's using concepts like projection to deflect valid criticism.
Oh, the mirror defense.
Yeah,
If you have a problem with me, it's actually a reflection of your own unhealed shadow.
exactly that.
Right.
You're just projecting your insecurities onto me. It is a brilliant defensive maneuver. It effectively makes the person doing the behavior untouchable.
How so?
If I hurt your feelings and you complain, I turn it around and say, why does my freedom trigger you? You should look at that.
It drives people insane. It's gaslighting with a PhD in psychology.
It is gaslighting. It uses the language of healing to protect the ego.
Yeah.
And Collison makes the point that, look, projection is a real psychological phenomenon. We do project things onto others.
Sure.
But sometimes it's not projection. Sometimes you just acted like a jerk.
Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, and sometimes you're just being rude.
And you need to own that without pivoting to a lecture on shadow work. That is true accountability.
So, if the divine feminine isn't the magic cure, and if toxic masculinity is just a label for bad behavior, what are we actually aiming for? What is the solution here? Because we can't just tear it all down and leave people with nothing.
The goal, as Collison defines it, is painfully simple. It's not divinity, it's maturity.
Maturity, that is not very sexy.
Yeah.
It's hard to sell a maturity retreat in Bali.
It doesn't sell well, but it's the truth. The author argues we need to move beyond gendered ideas of healing. The standard is the adult standard.
So what does a spiritual adult look like, regardless of gender?
It looks like integration, and this
Right.
brings us right back to Carl Jung, who we mentioned at the start.
Right.
Jung didn't say men are this, women are that. He said everyone contains both the anima, the inner feminine, and the animus, the inner masculine.
So we all have the full deck of cards.
We all have the full keyboard. Psychological health isn't about playing only the feminine high notes or the masculine low notes. It's about range.
Flexibility.
Yes, a mature person, man or woman, has the capacity to be receptive when the situation calls for listening, and they have the capacity to be assertive when the situation calls for action.
So they can be nurturing.
They can be nurturing to a child, and they can be fierce in a negotiation.
That makes so much sense. If you lock yourself into, I must always be soft and yielding because I am a goddess, you are actually crippling your ability to function in the world.
You are lobotomizing half your psyche. The goal of individuation, of becoming a whole person, is to have access to all your tools. You need the sword and the shield, the softness and the hardness.
So what's the final verdict here? Do listeners need to go home and throw out their sage bundles and cancel their Moon Circle memberships?
No. Keep the sage if it smells good. Go to the Moon Circle if it brings you community. The verdict is functional. Collison says you should audit your framework.
Audit it.
Ask yourself specific questions. Does this spiritual practice help me handle conflict better? Does it make me a more reliable friend? Does it help me take responsibility for my mess?
If the answer is yes,
Then it's a tool. Keep it. Use it.
and if the answer is no,
If the framework gives you a vocabulary to avoid difficulty, if it gives you fancy words to hide your fear or your selfishness, then it's a trap. And it doesn't matter if that trap is lined with velvet and smells like lavender, it's still a cage.
that is such a clear litmus test. It's about the function, not the aesthetic.
Precisely. The work is the same for everyone. Develop emotional capacity. Take accountability. Communicate clearly. The destination isn't divine. The destination is grown up.
You know, we started this deep dive thinking we were looking at a critique of women or a critique of spirituality, but really this feels like a critique of the human tendency to find the easy way out.
It's a critique of the shortcuts we take. Whether it's the alpha male acting tough to hide his insecurity, or the divine goddess acting floaty to hide her fear of confrontation.
They're just two sides of the same immature coin.
Exactly. Both are costumes.
Both are costumes. And the work is to take the costume off. So as you listen to this, whether you're deep into the divine feminine world or you're completely skeptical of it, here is the challenge. Check your identity. Are you doing the work, or are you just wearing the brand?
That's the question that matters.
And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today. Imagine if we stripped away all the gendered labels. If we stopped saying toxic and divine, masculine and feminine. If we just had immature and mature, would we actually be relieved to just deal with that reality? Or do we cling to these gendered labels because deep down they give us permission to stay incomplete?
A very provocative question.
Something to think about next time you check your horoscope. Thanks for diving in with us.
See you next time.